An isekai with not one, but two fully trained combat protagonists? Okay, I am sold. Let's talk about the 10 Realms. Hey everybody, welcome back to Fantasy Inc. Glad y'all could take time out of your day to check out a new series review. This one is going to be on The 10 Realms by Michael Chatfield. This is a 12-book series. I know the title is a little misleading with it being called The 10 Realms, but the author decided that he needed to throw a couple two-parters in there, and it is appreciated. Jumping into a semi-spoiler-free review, the series follows two protagonists, both Eric and Rugrat, respectively. No, I checked. Rugrat is not his Christian name. It is Jimmy Rodriguez, but only his mama really calls him that, and that's only when he's in trouble. But these two gentlemen, mid-battle on Earth, contracted something called the 2-week curse. And in this time, they have 2 weeks to get their affairs in order, maybe train up a few magical gifts that come along the way, because then, poof, they disappear and no one on Earth knows what happens to anyone who contracts this curse. They find out that it is a transportation of some sort, and they are swifted away into a new realm, or should I say, 10 new realms. Yeah, I went there. I did it. Though this series is a very long one, it is finished. And you guys know I love reviewing finished series. Not to throw any shade to any other ones that are still working on it, but I gotta give a lot of props to Michael Chatfield, the author of this series, because he started it. The first book was published in, I believe, 2018, and the 12th book was finished in 2022. So that is, what, 3 books a year on average. Incredible. Gotta say, the series is fantastic, and I hope y'all check it out, and here are a few reasons why, or maybe why you shouldn't. So jumping into my first pro. Gotta be one of the best bromances in the fantasy genre. It does compare to, one would say, the best bromance out there, Lies of Locke Lamora, but Rugrat and Eric are ride or die. They are willing to jump into battle, covering each other's flaws and making sure that the other person knows their flaws along the way. They are very one-track minded. They want to gain as much power as possible, and they want to beat the other person in a good-spirited, competitive manner. And if that doesn't give you some drive as a main protagonist, I really don't know what would at the end of the day. Such a good friendship. Got me teary-eyed on a couple occasions, but maybe that's too much information. Jumping into the cons for this series, and yet there are two. They're minor, but they're there, and ironically, they have a bit of a paradox between one another. To give a little more context, there is 12 books out there, and the average length of the first 10 books is about 500 plus pages. And on the back half of the series, or I should say a back quarter, the books end up being about 225 to 250 pages. So that is a substantial decrease in word count. So my point is the ending does feel slightly rushed. So that is something to consider. Still a great ending to the series, don't get me wrong. Tied it up and put a bow on it. Michael Chatfield, you are amazing. But that is something to consider because it is just a complete switch up with pacing. The slight other con, which is the paradox to the first one, is there is a decent chunk of exposition dumping throughout the series. Now, I'm all one to understand the magic system. I'm one to love the lore of a series once I really get enraptured into it, but there are quite a few paragraphs here and there that we are just getting thrown into very detailed information, whether it's on formations, whether it's on smithing, whether it's on alchemy. There are going to be long sections and many chapters, and if it's not your jive, then it is something to consider. Personally, I'm a big fan of all three and the other topics that were covered there, but if you are not prepped for long exposition, it is something to consider before picking this one up. Jumping into the second and final pro, this series does the city building trope so dang well. From book number 1 all the way until book number 12, you get to see what's the basis of building the infrastructure, gaining participants in the city, making sure that everything is going swimmingly and staying under the radar before they can actually build their power base up and be challenged by larger powers. And my goodness, this one is so dang good. The city's name is Alva, and they really do it justice, I have to say. I haven't seen a city building trope done this well since Defiance the Fall, but you know, that's really on the back end. Our main protagonist in that series spends very little time actually developing the city around him. Same here, but you get a lot more peripheral views of side characters who are actually making sure everything is running smoothly, putting WD-40 wherever it needs to go to make sure that this city does not fall apart, and you get a better viewpoint of the mentality of these side characters through the lens of making sure Alva is functioning properly. And that was a great tool that the author was able to utilize to show us, you know, what's happening back home when our two main protagonists are out adventuring. So highly recommend this series completely. Really did enjoy it. It's definitely going to be one I come back to in about a year or so, because y'all know how expensive Audible credits are, but I digress. I hope y'all give this one a chance. Trust me, the cons are very slight, maybe other than the exposition dumping, but if you can get through that, I highly recommend this one to check on out. Now we're gonna go ahead and jump over to the deep dive, talking about the spoilers for the series, what I really enjoyed, and why y'all should pick it on up if you do have the time and the money. With that said, thank y'all for y'all's time, and I hope everyone keeps reading. In this series, we really got to see what the advantage of prep time is for an isekai. A lot of series out there do not give their main characters any time to prepare. They're walking across the street and here comes Truckun along the way to send them on their merry way to a different world. Not this series. With the 2-week curse, these gentlemen didn't know what they were getting to, but they knew that they needed to be prepared. They brought rifles, they brought ammo, they brought MREs, they brought medical equipment. These gentlemen didn't know what they were getting into, but made sure that they had all the tools they needed to accomplish whatever they were getting into. So I think that is a very interesting route that I haven't seen a lot of authors take, which is why I did very much appreciate the series, or at least one of the many reasons. Now, when it comes to the series as a whole, my favorite thing overall has to have been the city building trope, having taken Alva, a border village about to be overturned by a beast horde coming in, and them turning these 200 so villagers into what ended up spanning multiple realms of an empire near the end of the series. And they were able to weather the storm of all these more powerful entities coming down and bullying them, basically. Because as we all know, if you're going to read a cultivation series, you have to be prepped for young masters being arrogant, sex being arrogant, and those powerful wandering cultivators messing up some noodle shops. And though we may have not gotten that last one within this series specifically, I think the point still stands. And they were able to keep a low key as long as they could until the Willful Institute pushed them one too many times. I really did enjoy the fact that they failed at Buzzgal around, what was that, book 5 or 6? And not a lot of authors are willing to take such a large toll on their main characters. Yes, you know, we might lose a side character here, or we might get pushed back on with the main goal of the plot for an extra couple hundred pages until they find a workaround. That's not what happened here. Michael Chatfield just said, y'all have spent the last 2 books building up this city, fighting for it, bleeding for it, dying for it, and just to show how big of competition that y'all have in the higher realms, I'm just going to take it from you. And after a magnificent whole siege and battlefield scene, Michael Chatfield put pen to paper and he said, y'all have to go back to the drawing board here, recoup your losses. And then we jump into, what was that? The second part of the 7th realm, the 6th realm, it's one or the other. And they were able to fight back at Alva in their actual home territory. And that was the largest advantage that these people of Alva had. They kept their cards close to their chest, and at every turn they were underestimated. And they were able to, use the misinformation that they spread, use the tactics from Earth that Eric Rugrat and all the other Earthers brought to this new town, this new empire, as well as the knowledge of the people of the 10 realms to really turn everything upon its head. And my goodness, I loved every second of it. Now, when it comes to the back quarter of the series, like I mentioned, it is much shorter. I was so surprised when I started book 10, early one morning and, had it finished by lunch and was very confused. I checked my speed, like, no, it's still at 1.4. Went ahead, downloaded book 11 and had it finished by dinner. Yes, it's a problem. I have an addiction. I acknowledge that. I'm seeking counseling. But it really did fly by. My favorite book, however, probably was book 11. I am a sucker for a school arc, for those of you who have seen some other videos. So when we get to see some good training and we get to see some main characters being humbled here and there, which Eric and Rugrat certainly were, and some power leveling, I am hooked in. And that's what we got in book 11. Even though we didn't get the fantastic battle between the door kickers and the other team, we still were able to infer that probably Eric and Rugrat would have lost there, but it would have been a dang good fight. And then you obviously have the trope, the death of the mentor, which brings the students together. A little romance at the end of it. I did think that was interesting how romance was very lightly touched upon, throughout the series, like very light touches here and there, almost as an afterthought. And then at the end of book 12, both the gentlemen are pairing up very quickly. So I thought that was a little odd. Don't know how necessary it was, since it wasn't really acknowledged throughout the series very much at all. But it wasn't a bad decision. We're happy to see Eric and Rugrat, finish out the series on top, starting the next chapter of their lives and potentially jumping into these tears in the 10 realms to see what else the universe or the multiverse, I feel like every series is a multiverse now, has to offer. With that said, loved this series, cannot wait to check it on out once I've forgotten it in about 6 or 12 months. To give myself a little refresher here. I hope y'all all felt the same way. Feel free to comment below what y'all's thoughts on this one was, and feel free, always, I'm taking recommendations, and if it is an audiobook and if I check it out and I like it, I'm gonna download it, because we've already talked about this. I have a problem and I'm not seeking a solution. But thank y'all for your time. I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your week, and be sure to keep reading.